If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian yet, well, first of all, what are you waiting for? Second, you'll want to catch up before you keep watching this video because there will be some serious spoilers. Of course, like all other Star Wars fans, all we want to talk about is Baby Yoda. He's cute, he's green, and apparently he can use the Force. There's definitely a lot more going on with this little one than meets the eye, and he could have an important connection to Star Wars history. Is there any detail so small Star Wars fans won't argue about it? The answer to that question is clearly a resounding no, but I wanted to take a moment to address the Max Rebo in the room. I know that the creature Pedro Pascal's Mandalorian found at the end of the first episode isn't really the late great Master Yoda.
For my ally is the Force.
This show takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, so he's long gone, and as far as we know has no actual biological relation to this cute little creature. But the baby who happens to be from the same species as Yoda is a little long, so I'm going to go ahead and keep calling it Baby Yoda. Feel free to demand my head in the comments section, but for those of you who love Star Wars and appreciate brevity, let's keep going. George Lucas purposefully put a lockdown on info about Yoda's species, so much so that we don't even know what they're called. But since Master Yoda and Yaddle from The Phantom Menace both made it onto the Jedi High Council, many fans assumed that their kind is predisposed to being able to use the Force effectively. Going into the second episode of The Mandalorian, I really just wanted 2 things. Nothing bad to happen to that sweet little baby Yoda, and to see it use the Force. All I knew for sure was that he's 50 years old, very cute, and the same species as Yoda. But I was confident that it could use the Force no problem. And what do you know? It did. In the second episode, the Mandalorian has to deal with a group of Jawas who stripped his ship for parts while he was off acquiring the cutest being in the galaxy. Kuiil helped him talk to the Jawas instead of just disintegrating them, and they agreed to turn over the parts in exchange for an egg. Sounds pretty simple, but this gross-looking egg was guarded by a mudhorn that wasn't about to let it go so easily. The Mandalorian got pretty beat up during this encounter, but survived thanks to some timely intervention from Baby Yoda, who used the Force against the beast. Using the Force like he did was enough to knock him out for hours, and he fell into a deep and adorable sleep. The confirmation that Baby Yoda can use the Force is huge, but we still know precious little about where Baby Yoda comes from. But besides Yoda and Yaddle, who are canon characters, there's another member of their species who might have a connection with Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian race. It could also help tie a piece of compelling non-canon lore back into the main Star Wars canon. Knights of the Old Republic is a video game that's largely considered non-canon, but just because something wasn't canon for a while doesn't mean that will always be the case. In fact, many elements from the game have found their way back into the canon, like Rakata Prime, Terentatex, and Selkoth, just to name a few. So it isn't totally out of line to suggest the elements from this franchise might find their way into current Star Wars projects like The Mandalorian. And in the Knights of the Old Republic video game and comic books, there's a member of Yoda's species named Vandar Takar. Like Yoda and Yaddle, Vandar was a Jedi Master who sat on the High Council, which isn't very surprising. Bunch of Force-wielding overachievers. What makes him interesting in this case, however, is the fact that he was active during the Mandalorian Wars. While Vandar might not be canon, at least not yet, this conflict is. It was a series of battles fought between the Mandalorians and the Jedi Order. And spoiler alert, it didn't end well. In fact, it culminated in a huge battle which ended up rendering most of the planet's surface into unusable desert. Yes, that just puts it on par with most other planets we've seen in the Star Wars universe, but still. Apparently, this galaxy just happens to have a lot of deserts.
I don't like sand.
The war between the Mandalorians and the Jedi took place a long time before the show started. Vandar Tokar lived about 3,000 years prior to the beginning of A New Hope, and we're well past that at this point. Yoda's people clearly live long lives, but Master Yoda was already looking pretty old at 900. So 3,000 years is a real stretch. Plus, in his non-canon story, Vandar lost his life at the hands of the Sith Lord Darth Nihilus. But while he was alive, Vandar took on many Jedi pupils and trained them how to use the Force. He had a huge influence on many people, and thanks to some fancy Star Wars tech, there's a chance he could live on in a way. His wisdom and personality were stored in an interactive holocron, an information storage device used by the Jedi and Sith alike. This means that although Vandar is long gone, it would still be possible for the Mandalorian to learn about him and interact with him in a sense. Considering how fresh his wounds are about what his people have been through, this would definitely be an interesting and possibly heart-wrenching scene. Since you're clearly obsessed with The Mandalorian and want the latest info and insights, make sure to click that subscribe button and turn on your notifications instead of putting your video watching fate in the hands of YouTube's algorithm. If you're on a phone, double check your notification settings. Now, let's get back to that little green baby. It's understandable that when most people first saw Baby Yoda, they wondered if he was in any way related to Master Yoda. But what if it turns out it's related to a Jedi with a history that is more closely entangled with the Mandalorian? How would it impact the story of sweet little Baby Yoda if he was related to someone who played a role in the Mandalorian Wars? After all, it's clear the Mando and the rest of his people have been through a lot. There was a time when they wore brilliant armor made of Beskar steel, handed down and reforged over hundreds of years and many generations. Now the Mando has to take suspicious and dangerous missions just for a chunk big enough to forge a single pauldron. Times are tough for the Mandalorian, and even though Pedro Pascal's Mando is way too young to have lived through the Mandalorian Wars, they're still a part of his people's history. And considering how unpleasant and devastating that history has been, it would be understandable if the wounds were a little fresh. The Mandalorian has protected Baby Yoda so far, but will that change if it turns out he has a connection to Vandar Tokar? There is so much incredible expanded universe stuff out there that it wouldn't be surprising if Star Wars fans like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau started incorporating some of it into The Mandalorian. And a portion of the lore that involves both Baby Yoda and Mandalore's history would be particularly poignant. And it would work around the possible issues with having the baby be connected to Master Yoda. While we don't know much about his species, we do know quite a bit about Yoda. He's a character most people love, and he's been a huge part of the franchise for a long time.
That is why you fail.
Suddenly giving him a son or a long-lost relative would impact everything we thought we knew about him. That might not necessarily be a bad thing, but it could be. Plus, with all the characters and potential characters out there, it just seems unnecessary to involve Yoda himself in this storyline. And let's not forget that the Jedi High Council frowns on romance, to put it mildly. It might change the way people view Yoda, plus it would be kinda strange that he didn't mention anything to Luke Skywalker about it. If Baby Yoda is a descendant of Vandar, it could be worked into his origin story, and it would be easier for fans to accept than the idea that Master Yoda was getting down on Dagobah instead of just eating lizards. Even if Baby Yoda's ancestors don't include Vandar, it would definitely be interesting to learn if its species' history crossed over with that of the Mandalorians. Vandar Tokar did lose his life at the hands of Darth Nihilus, but it was a complex situation. It wasn't just a high-stakes lightsaber duel. It involved a power that could come into play in The Mandalorian or even in The Rise of Skywalker. After all, if Vandar becomes canon, why can't Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger? Now that's a pretty awesome nickname. Vandar was called to a Jedi conclave by a Jedi Master named Atris. It was a super-secret meeting of those who had escaped from the First Jedi Purge. The agenda of this meeting was to identify the Sith threat to their order, and they hoped the Miraluka would be able to help. These beings were sensitive to the Force, but gathering together with the Jedi just made them a better target. It turns out that Atris had been less than secretive about the meeting, hoping that their enemy would reveal itself. Well, in that sense, the plan did work, but it also resulted in Darth Nihilus feeding upon the life of the planet, destroying everything on it, including Vandar. Feeding on the Force is evil, but it is an incredible power. Many fans have been speculating that Emperor Palpatine may do something similar to Rey and or Kylo Ren at some point in The Rise of Skywalker. If Vandar becomes canon, then it's possible this part of his story would be too. With Darth Nihilus displaying this kind of power, it could open the door for it being used by other evildoers like Emperor Palpatine. Baby Yoda is such a cute little creature, but uncovering the secret of his parentage could also reveal a massive evil power. And let's not forget that the remnants of the Empire are trying to get their hands on Baby Yoda, and they want it alive. Somehow, we don't think it's because they want to cuddle it. Instead, it seems a lot more likely that they want to clone it for some nefarious reason. Would the Mandalorian be more inclined to hand over Baby Yoda if he knew its species or specific ancestors had something to do with what happened to the Mandalorians? Or would he be able to look past that and keep Baby Yoda out of the insidious hands of the Empire? And if he doesn't turn in the bounty, just what is he going to do with Baby Yoda? Being a bounty hunter sidekick is no life for a baby, even if it is 50 years old and can use the Force. Although the Mandalorians and the Jedi were enemies, let's not forget that there has been some crossover. Ter Vizsla was the first Mandalorian Jedi and used a unique weapon called the Darksaber. It's like a lightsaber, but yeah, you get it. Maybe Baby Yoda could help the Mandalorian rebuild somehow. After all, he already saved him from being crushed by that big mudhorn, so it seems like they're off to a good start. Well, what do you think about the significance of Baby Yoda? Do you think he's just there to look cute and pull on your heartstrings, or is there something greater in store for this little green dude? Let us know what you think in the comments section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from CBR. Bye for now.